Well, hello, Maverick traders. It's the currency recap time. Joe with you. It's the 6th of March, another Thursday, getting into the end of the week. You know how this works. Let's get into the market action. I'm first off going to take a look at some of the news of the day, see what the markets did, and see if we can't pair some currencies together to trade.
Disclaimer. This video was created for professional Forex and crypto traders. Maverick Currencies is a proprietary trading firm that employs professional traders around the world. Our traders trade firm capital and keep 70 to 80% of profits they generate. All trades and analysis in this video are for professional traders only. If you are interested in becoming a professional Forex and currency trader for Maverick, click the apply button in the video description. Let's break down what happened today.
Moving into the market analysis, you'll see that we actually just had another one of those days, kind of a push and a pull. So real quick, let's get into the news of the day. U.S. jobless claims less than expected, but the filings increased from federal workers. It was a small drop, one of the first times we've seen a drop in a little bit, but I imagine this is going to change very quickly if we continue to see some layoffs and a little bit of slowing. We did have an ADP number the previous day that was super low, very low. So we know there's not a lot of hiring going on. And if we continue to see some federal workers laid off, we could expect that number to move higher. The markets didn't really do much. They were already selling off. We'll get there in a second. But that didn't really help. ECB cuts rates by their expected 25 basis points in line with expectations. Went on to say that they're pretty comfortable with where things are going. Obviously, there's going to be things that can change in the future. But for now, they're pretty happy with the pace. Now, the franc itself the euro itself actually hung in there. A little bit down, but we'll take a look at it. In fact, here it is. Big bounce on the yen, 0.5%. The dollar slipped a little bit more. Big move up on the franc. I think that's follow through from their CPI number. It was a little bit higher than expected, but it's the first time that they've actually seen inflation slowing for quite some time. So I think that's a carryover from a couple of days ago. Euro, like I say, just down a little bit, even in light of the 25 basis point cut. Pound down, CAD flat, Aussie down a little bit, the Kiwi hanging in there. So not a whole lot going on. U.S. markets obviously just completely rolled over again. Pretty decent amount of selling. We'll get to the chart here in a second. It gets it a little bit more ominous. World index down as well. Crypto slipped, gold slipped, and oil slipped. So everything actually kind of slid a little bit today. But we'll see pattern-wise. This is such a reactionary market. I kind of have to focus on it, but it's kind of difficult when you're trying to pair things together. Let's get to our crypto. Crypto's kind of fun. We've got Bitcoin Cash up, and then Bitcoin itself down, Ethereum, Litecoin all down. But they're more of a consolidation pattern. Boy, have they been super amazing to watch over the last couple of days. I've seen some pretty large moves that have gone nowhere. So definitely reactionary markets, definitely news-driven, and definitely very difficult to trade, but a lot of volatility there. So here I have it. Take a quick look. I dropped to a -2. It's pretty easy to do that. We're thinking about kind of a retest. I know we only got one day, but today's candle was a little bit ominous. So I'm going to turn the volume up to the red side a little bit, if that makes sense, a little bit more bearish. And what it was the gap. So we talked a lot about this support level here. I think it was 58.4 area. And this can be a little wider if you want it to be. But we did, hey, look at this. We got that first move, very nice green candle. But when we close at this point and then we open down here and then sell a little bit lower, it becomes a little bit more worrisome. Now, this could easily jump up and put another big green candle up in there because this is the area that it's trying to test. Flush traders out, flush traders in, institutions are trying to dump and add, and you guys know how many different types of speculation there's out there, but there is a lot of activity around this level. It's really difficult to get the confirmation that we need when it comes to just the black and white charting. A real good example of that would be these 3 days. Pretty difficult to tell what's happening, but then the next day it was pretty obvious. So I imagine if we get a big drop down, okay, well, that makes sense. We'll be below some key points here, but another move to the upside, I wouldn't be surprised either. It's just going to be kind of choppy and sideways, but it was pretty easy for me to see this candlestick and actually just kind of take my outlook down to a -2. So speculative trading obviously continues, but we are below those key levels for now. It was easy for me to roll it down to a -2. Let's take a look at some of the economic news that has jumped out over as of late. This is that CPI, the Frank CPI. It is an increase from 0.5 to 0.6, but pretty excited because it was a lower increase than what they've seen in the past, seeing that inflation is actually slowing. And so the Frank's been pretty strong as of late. We did get the ADP non-farm, and that was massive. We talk a little bit about, today's unemployment claims, although they were less than expected, kind of on the bullish side. It's hard to kind of erase what's going on here with the ADP, knowing that federal filings will increase. They actually have in these numbers, but when you have a private sector that's not adding jobs, half of what was expected, then it becomes a little bit more ominous. So it was easy for the markets just to kind of continue to roll down. Euro came out and cut 25 basis points as expected online and pretty comfortable with where they're at. What do we got? Well, we got some Canadian numbers coming out. Unemployment rate, unemployment change. I think the U.S. non-farm employment change might be something. It's going to be interesting to see if it reflects what we saw in the ADP, but we'll see. Also, the unemployment rate. But that's about all we have. The U.S. markets themselves don't need too much of an excuse to continue to kind of bleed lower, especially with all these policy changes. Well, that's great for the equities. What about currencies? Well, let's go ahead and do our currency analysis and see if there's anything we could take advantage of for today. Let's start off with the yen. This was the strongest currency of the day, and it looked like it just had kind of an oversold bounce. It's been pretty wide. It's been in quite a wide range, as everything else has been. You could see this expansion from here out and then down, and then it's kind of getting a little tighter. More consolidation here on the RSI, along with the moving average flip-flopping SARs. I think it's still kind of glass half full just because of where it came from, but currently it's just pretty much a zero at this point. We're going to get days like this, folks, and you'll see as I go through these. When you have correctionary action, it usually hits them all at once. Jumping over to the U.S., the U.S. looks like it's trying to establish some sort of a floor. Now, it's been doing it very slowly. This is the velocity score on this, folks. So very bearish on the moving average, bearish on the SARs, bearish. I mean, that's a -3, but it's starting to flatten here. And so this flattening effect and the flattening of the RSI, I expect almost some sort of recovery or a small bounce. Easily a -3. I'll give it a -2 just because the price action is flattening. Look at these shadows here. And so if we get a little bit of a flip up, I think that -2 that I have won't last very long. But if you're -3 on this, I get it. Let's jump over to the Franc. Here's the Franc. A nice bounce off. Today it had a really good bounce after the pullback. So it's kind of in this nice, I almost wanted to call it a bull pullback, but it almost looks like a bear rally. And what I see in that is here. Now, if it can move higher and continue right back up to this area, well then, yeah, it's this nice, wonderful, deep bull pullback. But if it hits its head here, then it becomes more of this head and shoulders pattern, right? You guys have seen these before, or a reversal signal. So it could go either way. Now, right now, it was pretty easy to score this on the velocity side, because there were so many moving parts to it. So the first thing I had was a drop in the SAR, a up and down moving average, which I just kept as 0, and then a move up on the RSI. So this move up on the RSI, just getting over that 50, I didn't know how to score this. So quite honestly, guys, after this drop and this bounce, I just kind of wiped them out, and I figured I could just keep the Franc as a 0. And I was thinking that it was going to be a little bit more bullish, but when you see the chart on it, it's really not. Moving over to the Euro, hanging in really strong. They just cut 25 basis points, but it was expected. The Euro had a really nice rally going into this number, and it's still in a really good high base. I would think I would score this a little bit higher than I did. Now, I gave this a +1 because of the overextension. And when I see overextension in any sort of a chart, and you see this drop in this RSI, you know something's coming, maybe a pullback. It could stop right here. Flip-flop on the SAR, I kind of gave that a 0, and then I gave this the +1 because it was a really nice move on the moving average. So I gave it a +1 on that, but I think it's a little overextended, and I might expect it to correct here, at least on the velocity side of things. So you guys can see how everything's kind of either a little overextended or in a corrective action, which pulls everything to the middle. Let's move on to the pound. Pound's pretty much in the same situation. The euro is just a little bit more consolidation. I don't like how this RSI is dropping, but with the drop in the RSI, if the pound can actually stabilize and stay here, then it's going to become one of my favorites. The pound, I actually kept it right in line with the euro, so I kept it as a plus two. It's pretty crazy to see that RSI, but I do like how this moving average moved. I like the consolidation up here. I know we got a SAR that flip-flopped, but I still have to give it at least glass half full here and call it a +1. Moving over to the CAD, we'll see the CAD is just basically in an oversold bounce. We know that the tariffs really aren't going to be acted honoring the contracts the U.S. has with Mexico and Canada until the 2nd. There are negotiations going on with Mexico and the U.S. In light of actually moving the tariffs to the 2nd, honoring some of the Canadian and Mexico agreements that the U.S. has had, maybe opening up some negotiation, who knows. The CAD has slipped a little bit, but it has a little bit of a bounce going on here. The RSI moving higher, still below 50 though. This is a moving average that's sloping down, flip-flopping SARs. It was pretty easy for me to keep it at a -1. I was thinking -2, but this might play the consolidation game, maybe a little bit higher. And this might be a floor for it in the short term. So I'm just going to keep it -1. Moving over to our risk on currencies, I like these patterns. I like this Aussie here. I like how it bounced off of a low, a little bit of a turn here on its moving average, extended above, broke above a resistance. Let me get my lines out here, folks. So nice little bounce here above this resistance, right? Nice surge up, sets a new high, and guess what it's doing? Consolidating right back at that line. Obviously, good push here, a little bit of a stall out. It's going to retest this 50. So we might have a little bit of an emergence here, and I'd like to see those. Now, I do need confirmation. Now, 2 ways to confirm. Make sure it confirms either the bull pullback above one of these candlesticks here, or if you want to be a little bit further, see if it can exceed that previous high. Remember, it did that exact thing right here. This might be something nice to pair against a currency that's slipping. Maybe the dollar stays flat or starts to roll back over. Might be a pretty decent trade. Now, the way it is now, it's difficult. I've already looked at them. In fact, we'll take a look at them. And it just doesn't look like too good of a trade at this moment. Something to keep your eye on. Let's take a look at the other one. This is a Kiwi, same idea. Let's get my lines out here. Consolidation here. Nice little push to the upside. Sets this high. And this one's really not even pulling back. I mean, it could pull back a little bit more. But it looks like it wants to consolidate. Using the Kiwi, I'd wait for this thing to actually get above that resistance level before pairing it. We do have a SAR the RSI that's pulling back. But look at the surge this thing had. Even if it comes back down at 50 and turns. So a little bit kind of exciting, but too early. And that's kind of what's fun about today's class. A lot of times I have trades for you, but we're right in that transition. Today's the day where everything's pushing and pulling and going to that center point. So I don't really have much to trade. Real quick, folks, since we're here, let's take a look at our cryptos. This is Bitcoin. It's consolidating, but it's super wide. For you guys that watched this, man, that was a lot of fun. Jeez Louise to watch this move, right? Or I should say even back here, but boy, oh boy. Huge surges, but it didn't go anywhere. That's Bitcoin itself. Let's move over to cash. Bitcoin Cash actually went up and it stayed up. It hasn't moved today much, but it is a little bit more bullish. It was easy for me to kind of give this a +2. It's consolidating on this RSI. I know it might come down a little bit, but if we can establish a consolidation area here, even if it pulls back a bit, it's definitely outperforming over at least in this area here, right? At least in the velocity side. Ethereum, consolidating, but on the low end. Now, there's only one crypto that I thought was a little bit more bearish than this, and that's Litecoin, but we'll get there in a second. Had that massive range. I'll go the way back in here. This big spike up, big correction, and then kind of back where it's at. So if you're in here, if you're out there, you didn't make any money at all. So we're moving sideways here on the RSI, flatlining on the moving average, flip-flopping SARs. It's a 0. However, if this can continue to slip and it starts to play on this line, this could be something a little bit more on the bear side when it comes to cryptos. I think the one that I like the most when it comes to the bear side is Litecoin, because you guys can see here it's kind of already there. I gave it a 0. No, I didn't. No, I gave it a -1, which was kind. This support level's big. It's this drop here that really, the other currencies came back up to some of the areas after they dropped. This really didn't. So I'm wondering if this is just going to kind of bleed off. The RSI actually, look at this, barely kind of made 50 here and slipped over. So out of all the currencies, cryptos wise, if you're on the bear side, keep your eye on Litecoin. So this is what I got for today. You can see everything kind of smushed back into the middle. Dollar slid a little bit more. The yen actually had been strong, but it pulled back a little bit. Franc I thought was going to be stronger, but it's flat. You got Bitcoin Cash up at +2, and that's about it. There's not a lot of trades that I want to look at, folks, that I'm anxious to look at. But I'll tell you what, let's go out and just compare a few. I'll take a look at the pound and the euro against the dollar and maybe the Kiwi against the CAD, and you'll see they're just not there yet. All right, folks, I might have said pound versus the euro. I mean the pound versus the US, if I'm mistaken. So what I'm seeing is kind of a high base. Now, this isn't a bad trade. It's just early yet. This is going to have to consolidate and then maybe break out of resistance. So it might be early. And as I was talking earlier, the extension that I see in the pound and the euro as of late is a little bit alarming. I think there'd be more corrective action. But this could be a trade a little early yet. Let's take a look at the euro pairing against the US here. Pretty much the exact same thing, just a little bit more extended. And then let's take a look at the Kiwi CAD. You can see that it's actually kind of in a pullback. This is one I am interested in. I just need it to turn. So if it could find support here and turn. But those are the ones that are on my watch list. But they are on a watch list. They need to consolidate, either create some sort of corrective bull pullback and then break out of resistance. It's just a little bit early for me trade-wise. So overall, folks, we got some tariff dates that have been extended. Others aren't. I'm starting to see a little bit of negotiation going on, which what it's going to do is going to kind of extend this volatility. The reactionary trading should be expected, but it's going to be really difficult when it comes to trade because it's going to continue to stay reactionary. Always play relative strength and weakness. If you can find it, if you're uncomfortable, don't trade. Cash is a position. If you trade, don't overdo it. You don't need to take full-size positions, but make sure you're always positioning properly. All right, folks, thanks for joining me. We'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.